Welcome back. I'm your host, Kelle Sparta, Transformational Shaman, Spiritual Business Coach. I'm here with my best friend in Boquete, Katherine Lorange. And she is an amazing spiritual business coach. And we're going to talk about something a little different today because, instead of talking about business per se, we're going to talk about the process of creating transformation for your clients. How do you make sure that you get a transformative result from the work that you're doing? And, in coaching, we know sort of how that works. And, I'm sure that the ICF and all the other places that do coaching certifications are like, oh, well, this is how you do it, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, great. But if you're doing it in a group coaching environment or at a distance or doing distance learning, or if you're doing retreats that are supposed to be transformational, how do you create that transformation? How do you know that you can make that happen for people? Because a lot of people, especially when they're getting started, they're like, well, I kind of know what I want to talk about, but I don't know that it'll be transformational. And so, there's some pieces around that. So there are some pre pieces that you need to know as you're designing your marketing. Because if you're framing your offer as not a transformational experience, then you may find that there's a lot more resistance to any transformation that you're trying to create. However, if you are framing it as a transformational experience, the wonders of that is that when people opt in, they're actually opting into the transformation itself. And therefore, they have already started the process just by signing up, because that's what they're signing up for, right? So they've already stepped their energy into that transformative experience. And, for the stuff that I do, it's actually very interesting because people start reporting results the moment they sign up for things like the retreat, right? They start to say, oh, this happened and that happened, and I had this aha. It's like, yes, you've stepped into the energy of the retreat. And the more times I run this retreat, even if it's different every time, the more true that will be. We have that experience. I've been running the Welcome to the Woo program for almost 8 years now. And so the energy of that program has been consistent throughout. And therefore, people who step in now are getting results faster than the people who came in at the beginning, because the gestalt, which is the morphic field, the movement through the morphic field of the program, is in place, and it's been fueled by all the people who have gone through the program. And therefore, that energetic is there. And the moment somebody says yes, they step in and boom, they're off and running, even before they've opened the program, because they've stepped into the energy of the gestalt, right? So that's part of the process, is to make sure that you are framing what you're offering as a transformative experience, because that way people are opting in and saying yes to being transformed. Okay.
Yeah,
That's the pre-work.
there's this expression that the transformation is in the transaction. So
Mm-hmm.
when somebody actually makes the decision to invest in themselves, there is a level of energetic kind of mental emotional preparation that needs to happen, that when they say yes, that's a statement. They're putting a stake in the ground for a different kind of life for themselves.
Absolutely. Totally true.
Hmm.
So, these are all parts and parcel, right? And now, when we talk about this, let's talk about the investment level, right? Because if you're telling somebody you're going to give them transformation for $200, there's going to be an expectation of a much smaller transformation than if you charge them $10,000, right? Because the investment implies the level of the transformation. And so you have to keep that in mind as well. If you're going to do something that is hardcore, massively transformational, it is not fair to the person buying it to do it for a very low price point, because they won't realize that that's what they're opting into at that price point, right? It's not fair to them. You need to charge equivalent to the transformation that you're offering in order for people to understand that.
And they're not energetically matching it either,
Correct.
right? So if
Yeah,
you're charging $200, then their energetic investment is a $200 energetic investment.
correct.
So they're, even if the transformation is worth $10,000, they're not going to get it because they haven't invested energetically at the level that's available to them.
Yeah. And if for some reason they let it in, they're going to feel the karmic debt.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's going to be a problem for them. And so the people who are ready for the massive transformation will not sign up because they'll feel the karmic debt in advance. And so there's that piece too, right? So you want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that it's in alignment with the price
Mm-hmm.
that you're charging so that one, they buy in, and two, you're not creating karmic debt, and three, everybody's happy, right? So, okay. So that's the pre-work. Now, once you're in the experience, right? Um, the first thing that you have to make sure that you've done is you have to create safety. Without safety, there is no transformation because people will defend. If they feel unsafe in the container that you're holding for them, they will defend against any change that is coming because they feel comfortable and safe as the person they are. They know how to protect this person. They don't know how to protect while they're becoming someone else. And that, by definition, is what transformation is. You are literally becoming someone else. And so the it's a newer version of yourself, obviously, but you are ceasing to be the person you're used to being and becoming a new version of you. And there's no knowing what that version of you is going to be because you haven't created it yet. And therefore, you don't know if you can protect that version of you because you aren't going to be that person yet. So, safety, a lack of safety, will prevent all transformation from happening. So, in a group coaching session, that's set through good ground rules and boundaries. And if you are not setting good ground rules and boundaries, and I will tell you, rule number one needs to be that nobody coaches anybody else except you. That is rule number one for safety. And rule number two is if anybody gets abusive, they are booted with no recourse. There are no second chances. There's no nothing. It is just if you attack somebody else, you are now an unsafe person. You do not get to stay. And that is if you are hardcore about that and you make it very clear and you do not mealy mouth it and you say, these are the rules and this is how it's going to be, then one, it prevents people from venting at other people. It's like, you're allowed to be angry, but you got to be angry at me. Okay. If you have anger, you bring it to me. I can hold your anger. That's okay. But you're not allowed to take it out on anybody else in the group because that makes you unsafe and that makes the container unsafe. That makes the entire program cease to function. So if you want to be upset at me. That's fine. I can hold it. Right. But you need to make that ground rule very clear. And in fact, with my programs, everybody signs a contract that says they understand that. And so that is to keep the group safe. That also means you need to be safe. It means you don't get to take your shit out on other people, right? And so you've got to make sure that you're in a clean space. Okay? And so this is where safety is paramount. Now, in a physical environment, then yeah,
Can I just add confidentiality
yeah,
needs
thank
to
you.
be, and that would actually
Yeah,
be
I meant to
that's
say
my
that.
number one ground rule is confidentiality. So what happens in the group stays in the group, and that people can talk about their experience. So I experienced this, but they're not talking about other people's sharing or experiences or anything like that.
Yeah,
And that includes you. So I know that whenever I share anything, about a client, I had their experience or I had their permission. And I shared a story about my husband a couple of weeks ago, and that's a specifically I have his permission, his consent to do that.
yeah. And
Hmm.
so this is the thing that you've got to keep in mind in the work. Okay. So safety is paramount. If you are finding that everything in your group is grinding to a halt, safety was probably violated and you need to figure out how.
Or
Okay.
not set up. And safety comes down to you being able to hold that, right?
Yes.
Like you are the kind of cornerstone in holding the safety for the group.
Yeah. I had somebody in one of my groups once come to me and say, that some stuff was happening behind the scenes with someone else. And, I got some confirmation on that from some other people. And I was like, okay, this can't happen. And so, the person was removed from the group. And that's the only time in 7 or 8 years of doing this that I've had to do that. And, this is one of those things where you want to pay attention to your gut on things because sometimes you can tell these things in advance. So, um, Okay, so in a physical environment, safety is a very different thing. I mean, it's the same, but it's different, right? Because you're in physical space with people, and so the physical space issues can often be about touch. It's like if somebody is touch averse, you don't go and hug them. You get permission before you hug. You get permission before you touch. You get permission before you do anything physical in an environment with people. And that's a key factor, especially if you're going to deal with people with any level of trauma. Those are crucial for maintaining safe space, right? And then, the other pieces are people in physical spaces tend to get more triggered than people in group coaching environments, because they're in a deeper experience of the process. And so you also have to set expectations for how that's going to be for them in that space. If they get triggered, how are they going to manage it and things like that, right? So having an understanding of what to do if slash when you get triggered and where to go for that and how to manage it and all of that is probably a really good idea, right? And, things of that nature. So, and then there's physical safety just in general. If you're going to be running something at a retreat center and you're going to be doing a walking ritual in the dark, well, everybody better have a flashlight and everybody better have good boots. And you should have told them to wear good boots out in the woods, right? And everybody's got to have a warm coat if you're going to be someplace cold, right? The just the basics of physical safety. There's Kathy used to be part of the group that I used to go to their retreats, and part of the assignments was you had to put out the bags, the what are they called, luminaries? I don't know. They're you paper bags with sand in the bottom and a little tea light in them.
Right.
It just to frame the walk path at night, right? And so they had those along the walk path, and so we didn't have to have flashlights for everybody because the walk path was illuminated. If you were leaving the walk path, you were leaving the ritual, and so you weren't supposed to do that. So it helped to keep people on track, right? It's little indicators. And making sure that the process you're going to take them through is physically possible for everyone in the group. So if you've got people who have limited mobility or have bad knees or bad hips or can't get up off the ground by themselves or whatever you want, you need to schedule your event, plan your event around that. You don't want to make people be sitting on the floor and then not be able to get up without a lot of problems, right? That can be very embarrassing for people and therefore make them feel unsafe, right? So these are the types of things you want to take into account in physical space. And other things. So Marissa Adele, who runs the Holistic Entrepreneurs Group on Facebook, recently put up a post saying, tell us your horror stories about events you've been to and the healers you've gone to and whatever, because, there are them. And I was telling a story about a Tantra workshop I went to, and they had a workshop where people were expected to be in various stages of undress at some point during the event. And they had not closed the blinds on the windows at night when you could see clearly into the living room. And the roommates who lived there walked in midway through the workshop with everybody partially clothed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, talk about lack of safety.
Oh
And
my God.
he had a man who was serving as the example in the center of the room who was totally unclothed while everyone else was clothed. She invited him into the room, sat him down, and then got up and left to go do something
Oh
that she forgot.
my
Talk about
God.
making somebody feel unsafe. I was like, this is
Oh,
an unsafe environment this is what I'm saying, right?
yeah.
So these are the sorts of things you need to be
Mm,
very careful about in your workshop space, right? So, keeping
mhm,
things sacrosanct in your environment. And if
mhm.
you cannot control the environment, then you do not get to take people to as deep a level of transformation. And that is just the rule of thumb.
Well, and kind of related to triggers and depth of transformation, like you also like you really need to know your audience. So if
Yep.
they're like relatively new to the work, you only want to take them to a certain level as the facilitator, because what can happen is that if you take them too deep, you're going to get people like triggering and then popping like popcorn, right? And
Yep.
so you may not have the skills to manage that, and or you may not have the additional necessary people there to support those people who are then getting like triggered, right? So you might be
Yes.
doing kind of a piece of work with a person that, kind of a person, and it's their turn to do, the kind of whatever the work is that you're doing with them. But then other people are getting triggered as a result of that. And they're left like trying to navigate them themselves. Like that's not safe. That's not
Well,
safe.
and understanding the culture of the people you're working with too, because,
Hmm.
for instance, Kathy talks about a woman that she knew who had brought a whole bunch of Texas Rangers, a whole room full of Texas Rangers to tears, and then
Mm.
didn't know what to do.
Mm.
And in police culture, you show no vulnerability ever.
That's
And
not
to have a
appropriate.
room full of
Yeah.
people in tears and to have the facilitator not know how to make that okay,
Oh,
that was a huge problem, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And, another room where, another thing Kathy talks about, she went to an event where a Mayan shaman took people in to go to their, and she gave them instructions to go and um, retrieve their deepest fear and to face their deepest fear in a room of hundreds of people.
Mm.
She gave this instruction with no support staff
Wow.
in an
Wow.
American environment. And
Ugh.
there was a woman who got most people were smart. They picked something smaller, right? They did not go in for their deepest fear. But there was a woman who went there and could not get out. Her fear
Yeah.
was eating her.
Yeah.
And the shaman had no idea what to do about it because she had never
Mm.
in her culture, everyone knows how to go into and out of space because they
Mm.
were raised with it from very young child, and they were just she's just like, I don't know what to do with this, and she just left.
Yeah.
She didn't deal with it. So
Wow.
Kathy and another man had to go in and literally pull this woman out of her fears and
Wow.
drag her back
Yeah.
into physical
Yeah.
reality. And so, this sort of thing is stuff that happens, right? I mean, it's just
Mm.
these are issues that if you don't know your audience are an issue, right? And
Well, and if you don't know yourself
yeah,
too, right? Like
yeah,
if you have not done, if you're looking at doing kind of deep group transformational work, if you haven't done that yourself, if you have not done your own work, you should not be facilitating that in others because you don't know how to hold the space. You don't know how to go down to get them out. You don't know how to bring them out. You don't know how to manage the energy. And
yeah,
so, not to say that you can't do transformational work, but do it either, with a mentor, with a co-facilitator,
yeah,
or do it to the level that you've done it,
yeah.
like in your own work.
Well, and sometimes it's a matter of scale too. So, like
Mhm.
T. Harbecker used to do these Millionaire Mind and
Yeah.
workshops, and he did a train the trainer system where he had like 600 people in the room, right? And I was in the train the trainer program with him, and he did this process where he had people get on stage and like break through a lot of the things that were going on for them. But then he had volunteers in the back of the room who were not there to facilitate the transformation he just created. They were there to make sure nobody left the room.
Mhm.
And the work he was doing in the room wasn't fixing the things that were happening. And so one of his people, well, I had gone out to go to the bathroom for something, and I happened to run into a woman who was coming out of the other room because they split us into two rooms, and I met her, and I was like, her aura was completely shredded. I mean, shredded. She was half out of her body. She had no idea who she was. She was dissociated. It was bad. And I was just like, holy crap. And the volunteer came over and was like, no, you need to go back into the room. I'm like, you need to stop. And unless you can fix what is messed up with her aura right now, you need to go away because I'm going to fix this right now because she needs it. And, so I got her put back together again. We got her back in her body, got her aura repaired, got her to be able to stand in her new place and hold that transformation for her. And, I'm just, the universe stepped in that instance because the people that were trained and the people in the back of the room were not trained, is what I'm saying. And so, did everybody have that level of transformation? No. but no one was there who was monitoring for that level of transformation, right? No one was monitoring for that transformational thing that was happening, and for the fact that transformation can sometimes shred you if you go through it in a rough way. Um, and so, there was nobody there who was there to take care of that. And this is another way in which safety can be violated, right?
Mhm.
Is that you feel dropped. So I remember I was in a landmark forum preview conversation, and something came up in the conversation, and I said, "Look, I'm grieving my mom right now. Do you have space for me to talk about this, or should I just cap it and we'll move on?" And he said, "No, it's fine. You can talk about it." And I'm deep into my process about it, and somebody walks in behind me, and he does not stop them. And
Mhm.
he does not stop them as they walk into the front of the room and start talking to them. And in fact, he engages with them while I'm mid process. So, that was poor safety management, right? This is the
Mhm.
sort of thing that you've got to pay attention to. Now, thankfully, I know how to keep myself safe in those environments. That was okay, but I had long conversation with him and with the person above him about the fact that that was violated, and that, permission was asked and given, and therefore the space was expected to be held. And so, these are the types of things that safety is specifically
Mhm.
necessary for, right? You want to pay attention to, these are the ways in which it can go horribly wrong, right? Because you don't know how it's going to go horribly wrong. But I promise you, at some point, in some event you're running, no matter how hard you try, something will go horribly wrong. I mean, I had somebody have a stroke at one of my events a few years ago. That that's something you cannot control, right? But you need to know how to recover. You need to be able to be fleet on your feet and be able to recover, right? I went to an event once, wasn't one of mine, it was somebody else's, where somebody literally just started screaming in the bathroom at the top of their lungs in front of me. And I was trapped. She was screaming in front of the door. I couldn't get out. And they had staff, thankfully, they had staff who immediately came running and opened the door, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And they engaged with the screaming person, and they were like, "You want to go?" I'm like, "Yeah." No, let me out of here. And they dealt with her, and I got to, as a participant, move on and do my stuff, because that's what I was there to do, was to learn how not to be on duty all the time, how to do the work on myself. And ironically, the same person kept showing up over and over again when people would melt down next to me, which typically I would have taken over and done that work. But I was like, nope, I'm here for me today. And the universe kept giving me opportunities to decide. And I was like, nope, nope, nope. And the same person kept showing up, and she looked at me at the end and she's like, "I'm so sorry. I feel like I was catching everybody next to you all weekend." And I'm like, "Yes, you were serving me every time you did that." And I explained to her what's going on. And she was like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." Right. But this is why having safety plans in place is super important, and having sufficient staff to handle it is super important. There's a reason why I do small retreats here in Panama right now, because I am here and Jeff is here, and that's the size group that I want to work with, because I feel confident that I can manage everybody in the group without there having somebody feeling like they got dropped, right? And that's important. It's super important. Okay.
Can
So
I
that's,
can I
yeah.
just kind of back us up like right to the beginning
Mhm.
before you continue, and just to share that. So we're talking about transformation. And so transformation typically happens in one of two ways. And the first is through a strong emotional impact. And
Mhm.
so that's going to be at a retreat or an event or something like that. Or it's going to be a divorce or a death or a bankruptcy or an illness or something like that, right? So that's generally the first way it happens, is through a strong emotional impact. The second way is through repetition in a structure of support and accountability. So that's going to be your group coaching programs. So both offer transformation, but they're doing it in slightly different ways. So with my coaching programs, there's the small group, the kind of repetition, and then we have like strong emotional impact events, kind of not scattered, but scheduled throughout the year to accelerate it. So when Kelly's talking about safety in a group setting, that's typically going to correspond more to those high emotional impact events that you're putting on to facilitate the transformation.
Yeah, in person, yes.
Yeah, in person, yeah.
Uh, I will say there's one additional way that transformation takes place, and that's when a long held, deeply integrated belief is shifted.
Yeah.
That does not have to be either of those two things. But when it is ready to be shifted and it does shift, it cascades across everything and, creates an entirely new identity
Hmm.
based upon that new belief structure. And so it's rare that that happens, but it does happen. And so I wanted to make sure that that was included
Yeah.
in the list.
Yeah.
So,
So to kind of consciously set it up, it's going to be through the repetition or the high
yeah.
emotional. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so that takes us to the next piece, which is the identity shift. Thank you for the segue. So the identity shift is the next piece there, and that is how are you taking people from one state of being to the next, from being one person to being another. And that depends upon what aspects you're working on and how you're walking them through the process and all of the pieces, right? But there is if you're going to do a transformational experience, every transformational experience should start with where are they now and where do you want them to end up? That is the beginning of any transformational experience. Is you have to deeply understand both the starting and the ending point, and then you also have to deeply understand how to take them through the arc that gets them from one place to the next. You cannot guess. Okay? That means you have to have done the transformation yourself first. So you don't like look at what somebody else did and think you can run it just like they ran it and have it be okay. Because I promise you that there are other things that they did that you don't know about that are impacting the experience. And there are other ways in which they prepped people and in which they're interacting with people and in which they're managing the space and setting the energetics and all the things that you are unaware of. So I'll go back to a Twilight Covenant that I went to where I came in and everybody looked poised for this just horrific transformation. I mean, everybody looked like they were in massive breakdown and it was going to be ugly. And I was just walking around going, oh my God. And then at the end, everybody went through their transformation, but it all smoothed out and evened out. And I looked at one of the organizers and I said, really great job setting the intention for smooth transformation. And they just looked at me. They were like, how did you know? I said, because I watched them come in this way and they left that way. And the only way this was going to get to that is if the intention in the space was smooth transformation. I said, there was no other way that was going to happen. And she was just like stunned because they never said it to anybody. And it was not something you would ever known about unless you were like super observant and understood the energetics. And so, that's an example of one of those situations where, you could probably try and recreate what you had been through, but you were not going to recreate the experience because you did not have all of the pieces and parts. And I'm sure there were other elements in there that I personally did not register for what they created for the intention because it was a really intention based group and they were good at that. Um, but, this is what I'm saying. Don't steal other people's stuff because I promise you, you will do it badly. And, it's not copyright or anything. You're going to screw it up because you're not going to know all the pieces of what they're doing. Right. So this is why it's important to do your own process and to really be clear what's your starting point, what's your intended ending point, and what is the arc that gets people there. And then once you know the arc, now you have to ask what are the pinch points, right? What are the places in which they're going to break down? What are the possible hurdles that they're going to have to overcome, right? So, here is the process that I did to get from A to B. Now, what is likely going to get in the way of that? And that's when you insert little spaces in between that get them through those pinch points. So it would be the same idea as setting up a sales pitch, right? They're from I don't know if I want this to I want this. Here, what are the objections they're going to hit along the way, and how do we get them excited about wanting it? It's the exact same process, but this time it's a ritual to walk people through an identity shift, right? So you've got to self-select for people who want identity shift before they walk in the door, or else they're going to resist the crap out of it. And that's what we were talking about with the pre-work. And then you have to know where you're going to take them and they have to want to go there, right? Now, you can help people take different depths of dive, because some people have different levels of work that they're willing to do and levels of bandwidth that they have to offer for it. But that is something that you can build into your energetic intentions. And I do that a lot with my retreats. But everybody goes through the transformational process. Everybody goes through the movement, the gestalt of the experience. And in a transformational process, I'm going to say you can't really define the outcome strongly. You have to give them an idea of the outcome, something, a vision that they can buy into. But by definition, all transformational processes are initiations from one state of being to the next. And any initiation you do is going to walk you through a doorway that you cannot see the other side of. And it is a leap of faith that has to be taken. And even if you explained in great detail what was going to happen on the other side of the initiation, they would not understand it because they are not the person that they will be when they get there. And so therefore they will have a different experience of it than they would trying to understand it as the person they are now. And so there's a certain amount of that you have to accept and understand. And there's also another piece that happens that Kathy and I have been doing this. Kathy has been doing it for like 30, 35 years. I've been doing it for like 20, 25, something like that. And what we have learned over the years is that there, in any transformational experience, there is always an insert miracle here portion. And you write it all out, you decide what you're going to do with it, and you're like, okay, this is how it's going to go. And then at some point you're like, I'm not sure what this is. And don't force that. Okay. That is the insert miracle here portion. And when you get to it, what needs to show up will become emergent in that moment. And you need to just go with what is there, because every transformational experience in physical space that we have ever done has had that happen. And that is just part of the process. So don't panic when you look at something and go, I don't know what this is. That is an insert miracle here. Okay. And then just allow that to emerge from the experience. Okay. So do you want to say anything more about identity shift? Okay.
Yeah, that's a much bigger topic than we
It
have
is.
time for today.
Yeah, it's massive. So we're just sort of getting into the generalities of it. Okay, now your post identity shift. You've gone through whatever the process is that you've created for them, and now you have to give them place for a safe landing place for integration. And that means you're not filling them with a whole bunch of stuff. You don't want to give them a lot of stuff to do. You don't want to have them have to be interactive. They have to be able to be still, ideally without their phones, and give them a place to be still and allow what they've experienced to percolate into their beingness. Allow who they've become to coalesce within them. And then that should be a minimum of several hours in a physical space environment. That should be a minimum of several hours. Ideally a day or two if you have the time. And then there should be a celebration after that. And I will say, I'm going to go back to the integration point, because this is the thing I see lacking in so many events, is this quiet space for integration. And that is the thing that is most lacking in most people's lives too. So to say, oh, well, they can do that when they get home. No, they're not gonna, right? They're not gonna. Their lives are like busy. They're running around like chickens with their heads cut off most of the time. You have to build the integration space into your experience with them, because otherwise, they're just gonna they're gonna not integrate well, and it's gonna be an ugly sort of integration process. It's gonna take forever, right? So, and it's not going to feel right, and it's not going to land properly, and all the things. You want to give them space. Okay. Now, the celebration is actually the celebration is a way of saying, yes, I'm happy with my outcome. So that's one thing, so that you're setting their internal beingness to not want to roll backwards in the process. Right? Because we can get scared when we're a new person and we don't know everything about how to be that new person. And we can be inclined to want to go backwards, which is not possible, by the way. Once you've stepped into a new state of being, you can't go backwards. You can try, but you will be forever not right in that. Okay. So you need to anchor in them the goodness of the change that they have just gone through so that they can feel like, yes, this is right. And yeah, it may take a little bit of time to really fully get okay and know how to operate in this space and whatever, but it is good. So part of it's about anchoring that. And then the other part is about being witnessed in the change. And this is why you do it with more than one person, right? You're not just celebrating by yourself, you're also celebrating with others. So this is why we celebrate graduations and marriages and births and things like that, is because we are bringing the community in to cement and celebrate that achievement, that shift in change, that welcoming of the new child into the family of the community and things like that, right? Um, this is why we do those things, is because it cements it in the collective zeitgeist. And in that witnessing, it cements it more deeply in the person, right? And so there's a celebration where everybody's like, oh, we went through this together. Isn't this amazing? And look at how awesome we are. And this is just the best, right? And it's just a chance to blow off steam from the stress, because anytime you're walking through an initiation process, there is stress on the beginning side going, can I do this? I don't know if I could do this. There's always that. And then on the other side, the stress is over because you've gotten to the other side, but you've still got to release all of that pent up tension and whatever. And the celebration also helps to do that. So that's the reason why it's important to celebrate. And so we often have a final dinner or some sort of celebratory event at the end for that reason. So do you have anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I feel like that was a lot. I think people are going to listen to this a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we've
And I
just
think just
scratching
to,
this much of the surface. Yeah.
yeah, I think just to, again, just to reiterate kind of the majority of what Kelly was talking about in terms of process and structure, that's for in-person types of things. So that's going to be that high emotional impact. That's not going to be, necessarily the same. It definitely applies to, but the structure of maybe like a group coaching program is going to be, there's going to be some variations there.
There are variations, but I will say that having run my program for 7-8 years now, um, I will say that I see the same points happen. So there's an
Yeah.
arc with things. And so I do see those pinch points and I do regularly walk people through them. And that
Hmm.
it is a transformational process, and it can be high emotion depending upon what the issue is that they're dealing with, or if they get
Yeah.
triggered in the course of the
Yeah, for
course
sure. Yeah, for
in
sure.
their lives in general, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so a lot of that actually applies still within the context. And we do actually celebrate. We do a final
Mhm.
self-assessment at the end of our program that we compare to our first, and that's our celebration of the
Mhm.
transformation,
Mhm.
right? And so there is a celebration piece in there. And in the longer program, in the short program, I don't do this because it's only 4 months long, the first program. But in the second program, that's a year long, I actually build in integration space where they're like, take a week off, take 2 weeks off, do no spiritual
Mhm.
work, do no spiritual
Mhm.
practice, just be still,
Yeah.
get away from this and just allow it to land, right? And we do that several times over the course of the year process so that they have
Mhm.
time for integration. So I actually I build all of this into my online course as well.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
um and I think it depends upon the level of work you're doing too. I mean, I'm walking people on the express train, right? So it's like 5 to 7 years worth of personal growth work and a couple of years worth of energetic training for the first 4 month program. And then 10 years worth of energetic work and 10 years worth of 7 energetic and 10 personal growth work in the year program. So I'm walking people through a
Mhm.
massive amount of work in a short
Mhm.
period of time. And therefore, it brings things up faster. But that's why I'm giving them all of the integration points, and I'm giving them all of the other pieces there, is for that purpose. So does it have to be
Mhm.
that way for everybody? No. If you're doing smaller workings or you're doing things that are not as um, integrated, so like I'm moving like 8 or 10 different things at once all the time. And so if you're working on one issue as opposed to 8 or 10, then it's not going to be as intensive and you don't have to worry about it as much. But it just depends upon the level of work that you're doing and how you're doing it, and what the emotional context is for the people who are going through the process.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're transforming trauma, you'll end up with more results like what I've been talking about. Whereas if you're doing more like visioning, a higher future and manifesting, and not having to do as much trauma work, then you'll have less sort of this emergent stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in the course, I don't have the insert miracle here piece that doesn't show up, because the course is holding the structure and it's already created the entire gestalt, right? So that piece doesn't show up in there. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
in physical space, it almost always does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but good clarification. Thank you for that. Okay. All right. And with that, we're going to call this episode good. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. And remember, what you focus on is what you create. What you focus on is what expands. What you intend is what you create. So choose wisely. All right. Have a good one, guys.